everyone, welcome to another show with Mada Partners, and I've got Happy Camper Capital. I've got Don and Adam, and they're just going to talk to us a little bit about investing in a different asset class than multifamily or single family homes. It's investing in campgrounds. I just thought that it'd be kind of a cool information session that we can put on and just talk about different opportunities, because I don't think everybody goes out there and starts looking to want to invest in campground. And I think this is a great opportunity for people to discover this different asset class. So I'll let you guys take over.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you, Matthew. Thanks for having us on. So obviously, as you mentioned, we're with Happy Camper Capital. Don and I work together, we purchase campgrounds, so commercial real estate, and we're doing it through means of syndication, which, if I don't know how much of your audience is familiar, is when we get a group of people together to buy a large asset, by bringing the money together and the property together, and then of course everybody's a fractional owner in it. So this is something that's been really popular in the multifamily space. So apartment buildings, other commercial assets like office buildings, some industrial, really wasn't a thing in this space until a couple of years ago. And that's frankly just because this asset wasn't really something that anybody so much invested in until a couple of years ago. It was more mom and pop heavy business. So it was, to be more specific, we invest in RV resorts, campgrounds, marinas. And this was a heavy mom and pop business, run in mom and pop ways. And there's a lot of good that comes from that. It's becoming institutionalized now, and we're kind of getting in on the front end of that as we, see a lot of opportunity to really improve these businesses and, the assets they are, and, have the potential to, give much bigger returns than other light commercial assets. So it's kind of a 30,000 foot view. Do you have any specific questions on that I can jump into?
Well, I think maybe just describe what's the difference between maybe like a multifamily deal versus a campground, just because, when you think about campground, there's a higher turnover of campers versus renters. So maybe talk about the back end of maybe the operation or.
Yeah, the best comparison I can give is if you were comparing, say, a single family rental home to an Airbnb. The Airbnb is going to outperform that single family every day of the week. It's also going to be a lot more work operationally. It's hospitality. That turnover does come at a cost, but there's also much greater potential gain on that there. This is much the same thing. So we seek a transient population, which is people who live there or who stay there for less than 30 days. So we're looking mostly nightly, week users, up to a month. So it commands a higher rent on the lot per night. The assets we're purchasing are amenity rich. So that's the stuff we look for, is fun vacation properties, lots of really neat things you can do. And we do have a greater potential. Now, of course, there is a lot more work involved in that. We own our sister company, which is a management company called Beyonder Camp as well, who oversees these operations, because they are very much human resource intensive. If you were to compare the operations we run to, say, a similar size mobile home park, you can run a mobile home park with one full-time person, one part-time person, whereas our campgrounds are going to take 10 to 15 people in some cases to run the same operation, because we have a store, we have food services, we have, reservation staff, we have maintenance folks on staff, a lot more maintenance folks typically, because, we're seeing a lot more use, a lot more wear and tear. Again, big operations, a lot to oversee, but again, much greater potential. If you were comparing it again to like the multifamily or the single family, we're looking to we actually look at occupancy rates versus vacancy rates. It's kind of that pessimism, optimism thing, right? We're looking at the glass more than half full, that we're looking to keep those occupancy rates high. And one of the great things about this is we aren't just, we aren't just capped to market rates that we can go on, whereas like if you're looking at monthly rents on an apartment, we're looking at actually occupancy rates on a day by day, night by night basis. So as the weekends come, we can actually, and as our occupancy increases, our rates go up, much like hotel rooms do. If you've ever looked at a hotel, you don't typically see the same rate, 2 nights in a row. It changes with the occupancy. This is something that mom and pops have not been doing for a long time, that we are able to do to help improve the revenues and also realistically reduce the wear and tear on these facilities. we get a lot of these campgrounds that have seen their best years ever in the past couple of years. And, we have mom and pops telling us they're getting 100% occupancy, weekend after weekend. And I'm saying, well, that means you're also seeing a lot more wear and tear, and you're not seeing the highest, rates that you could. So, we're really actually targeting 90% occupancy. That's what we're, if we get at 90%, we've really optimized the revenue.
Awesome. So when you're looking at getting to campgrounds, like a specific, amount of campsites that you guys look at, like what are the criteria that you guys look for when you guys are, looking to acquire a campground?
That's a good question. So there are a lot of smaller campgrounds out there. When I say smaller, for us, that means less than 100 rental sites. So that could be an RV site, cabin, glamping tent. And those are great if you're an owner operator. The mom and pop running it are probably doing fine. We have a lot more hands in the cookie jar, because we aren't going to have mom and pop running it. Our model is one of remote management. So we're going to actually have to install a general manager in that campground who is on payroll, which is usually a bigger expense than a lot of smaller campgrounds can stomach, just that. Because mom and pop, have been there working 70, 80-hour weeks doing all the jobs. We have to hire 5 people just to replace them. It pretty quickly eats up all the profits. And then, of course, we still have the investors we got to pay yet too. So for us, we really like to be north of 100 rental units. 150 plus is really, much easier for us. So larger campgrounds. We look at these a lot the same way you would any other piece of real estate. We're really considering the market around it, making sure that, we ideally like to be within 2 hours of a major population center. We're looking for diverse industries, growing cities, major travel hubs. So, regional, international airports and the like. And that within 2 hours of a population center is becoming really critical now, especially with gas prices where they are, especially presently. That's probably one of the biggest threats to this industry right now.
Okay. So maybe talk to us also about, going about, raising the capital for your campsite and the financing aspect of it too. Cause I think that's always something that, typically speaking, when you look at an asset like that, sometimes the banks are maybe not as lenient, or the criteria are a little bit different when it comes to loan to value. So maybe if you can talk to us about that, that'd be awesome also, please.
Well, I can speak to, I'll speak to the financing side, and I'll let Don speak to the capital raising side, since that's his specialty. So we are using commercial loans for these. Now granted, we're buying in the States, so I'm not sure if it's different in Canada. However, there are some government-backed loans. Being that this is a hot asset class right now, those aren't as popular. The sellers don't really like to get involved with SBA loans or USDA loans in our case, in a lot of cases, just because there's more red tape. There are more, more things that could cause the closing to be extended, that could cause hiccups in the financing. So they're typically, sellers, when they have this much demand, they're looking for, obviously cash and commercial, I should say private bank financing. The banks are really, it varies quite a bit bank to bank. And of course, given the current economic state we're in, especially with interest rates where they are in the States right now, we are seeing banks tightening up their requirements. A year ago, we financed one of our properties. We got an 80% loan to value loan, 3.5% interest, 25-year AM, 7-year term, incredible loan. That now this year, same asset class buying, 75% is probably about the best we're getting. Rates have been climbing. We just locked one in last week at 4.7, and it was 4.5, a couple of days prior to that. It climbed up pretty quickly on us. So, we are seeing those change. They fluctuate quite a bit. So it does require us to do a lot of shopping. We're finding that if we get involved with local community banks and credit unions that are near the campgrounds we're buying, they tend to know the property. They're a little more invested in it. We've been getting slightly better terms through them, but we have some national partners we work with as well too.
Awesome, great info. Thank you.
Yeah, and then for the capital raising side, it's if your listeners are familiar with the syndication model for multifamily, it's very similar. Obviously we want to raise that. For most of that down payment amount, plus the capex we plan to do. These properties we purchase are still a value add play. We go in there and make upgrades and add on amenities and things that'll make it nicer, that will bring in additional revenue. And so we of course account for that in the amount that we raise. So if we're going to say that that's 75% loan to value, we're going to need that, that 25% down payment plus the capex amount for the expansion or the upgrades that are going to be done. So in that sense, it's very similar structures as people are used to with multifamily.
And maybe, some of that maybe we didn't really touch about, and I should have asked this question earlier, is when you're buying a campground, obviously you're trying to optimize everywhere you can. So like, how do you optimize a campground? Do you add an extra shower? Do you have how do you make your extra income out of it? You can only, bring up the rents or bring up the per night to an extent, but what do you guys do to kind of add more revenue to the whole business model?
I love to say that, you're really only limited to your imagination on revenue centers with this. And I mean this because every time you thought you've optimized everything you can, you've put, yield management pricing in, which is other fancy way of saying dynamic pricing, where it changes by the night. Like I mentioned, you've expanded and you've added more sites where there's extra acreage to do so. You've put amenities in that let you charge higher rates, because again, you're not capped by the market, you're capped by the demand for that campground, which if you have the right amenities, you hit resort status, will bump you up a little higher. I'll give you a great example. We have a campground in Iowa we bought last summer, and we're following the business plan. We thought we had everything dialed in, and we were getting this place onboarded, and we were at the sporting goods store buying life jackets because we needed them. And we looked over and saw some paddle boards, and we said, we should buy a couple of those. Didn't even plan on it. We went and bought 2 paddle boards, $700 investment. We threw them in the pond, and nobody in Eastern Iowa had ever seen stand-up paddle boards, I don't think, because they didn't rent the first 24 hours. So that evening we went out and we jumped on them ourselves and then sent our kids out on them to ride them around. Next thing you know, they were rented all the time. We had them paid off in just over a month. So little silly things like that. They're now revenue generators, producing an extra $7,000, $8,000 a year, in revenue. So it's hard to say. I mean, things like, putting a soft serve ice cream machine in sounds so simple. In one case, that's $12,000 a year in revenue. So there are a lot of different services and products you can put in to really boost this. Just optimizing the way mom and pop are doing it. A lot of the time they did things because it was simple, but it wasn't always because it was the most profitable. That's why a lot of rates were fixed per night, and they didn't have those dynamic structures in, didn't have online reservations. And, the largest user group in this asset right now is millennials. And millennials are terrified to pick up the phone and call a campground. They'd probably rather drive an extra 45 minutes to one they could reserve online than have to talk to mom and pop on the phone. So lots of different ways we can bring revenue in.
Interesting. What about, with COVID and everything, I'm sure it's changed your industry quite a bit. People want the outdoor space and that, so I'm sure that's kind of changed a little bit, maybe the business plan or the outcome or the pro forma that you guys would have done earlier on some of these properties.
I'd say if anything, it's helped the industry overall. I mean, people are, of course, were already using campgrounds prior to COVID. But being at that, even my own personal case, we had planned at a out of country trip in 2020 that got canceled. All the flights were canceled. We couldn't go anywhere. So if people in that situation, they have plans, they want to go vacationing somewhere, but they can't. And so if there's those kinds of restrictions and you want to be indoors or on your own private space or be outdoors, I should say, then these are the perfect getaway. You get your own private space in your RV, but you're out in the open, in the outdoors. You get to go somewhere and have fun and do things. If you can't go to Disney World or whatever, this is the next best thing, we'll say. So you can you can still be outdoors and be safe, but be away from home and go have fun. So that's kind of really, I think, has boosted this industry overall. Again, it was already happening anyway. It just progressed that even more so. And like people are like Adam knows better than I do, but the demand for the new purchases of RVs and campers, they're like basically the manufacturers are behind schedule trying to catch up with all the demand for the sales they sold the year before. So there's huge demand that's came up because of it.
Yeah, the RV Industry Association is our leading indicator. They're the ones who actually track the data for the RV units sold. And the last 2 years they've seen substantial increases. 2020 saw massive increases over 2019, and 2021 we got the numbers out just in January. They exceeded 2020 by 38% now. So a lot of new RVs out on the road. The manufacturers actually backlogged. They're filling orders from 2021 that are way behind. And KOA, one of the bigger franchisors, and Woodall's Campground Management both do a good job of tracking data for the industry. And what they found is there's always been an attrition rate. People who buy an RV, get into camping, and then fall out. That attrition rate hasn't really changed. It's pretty much stayed constant. The people who said, yes, I was a first-time camper in 2020, and I plan to continue doing it versus not continue doing it. However, with that large of an influx of new people and roughly the same attrition rate, we've got a lot more users out there. So here in the States, and I keep quoting this, I wish I could give an updated stat on this, but the number from 2019 was that there were 2.5 RV units for every one RV site in the States. And, now there's been a lot of development in the past 2 years, but not to the tune of the new RVs that are coming out. So that ratio has certainly gone the other direction, and there's more demand than there's been before.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you guys coming on today and just talking a bit about what Happy Camper Capital is doing. And if you guys need to reach out, please feel free to reach out to Don or Adam, and you'll have all their contact info below in the video description. So thanks again, guys, for coming on board.
Love talking about it. Thanks for having us on.
My pleasure.
Thanks a lot.